Hello everyone and welcome back to the video. Today I'm going to go ahead and make an arena tier list. So we're going to go ahead and talk about the best and worst civilizations on this map. This is going to be a very current tier list for the February 2023 format. We've seen a lot of buffs and nerfs to certain civilizations recently, and the last time I made a tier list about arena was quite a long time ago. So a lot of things have changed, and we're going to be talking about some of those changes as well as which civilizations are now at the top and which ones are at the bottom and everything in between. If you guys are new to my tier list, basically we're going to go ahead and rank every civilization on the list from S till D, and the ones at the top of the list are going to be really proficient. They're going to have good matchups across the board. They're going to be the most powerful picks, and the ones at the bottom have really bad matchups, don't have clear strategies, and are just not suited for the map in general. Alright, without further ado, sorry, I'm just catching my breath a little bit because I had to kind of rush things through a little bit here. But without further ado, let's go ahead and hop in with the Aztecs. Also, before I start, I got a lot of feedback on previous tier lists that asked me to rank the civilizations in order of the DLCs, place them in the list based on the order of the DLC. I think that's extremely confusing because not everyone knows how many DLCs there were and in what order they came in. And so I don't think it's good feedback at all. So thank you so much for all the feedback. And I do listen to a lot of things, but that one in particular, I've heard you guys, and I'm choosing not to do it that way. I'm choosing to do it alphabetically because, first of all, that's the order that they're placed in the sites. And also, everyone can follow along alphabetically. Not everyone can follow along in the order of DLCs, okay? So I heard that feedback, but just please stop suggesting that because I'm not going to change it. Alright, let's hop in with the Aztecs. Now, the Aztecs on Arena have always been a top tier civ. In fact, they used to be the absolute best civilization on the map, but things have changed since the 2016 era where they were the best, and they're still really good, but they're not quite as strong. I'm going to go ahead and place them in the A tier here. Basically, they have really strong monks, and Eagle Warriors are always a decent option. The Eagle Warriors are not nearly as efficient as they used to be in the past, and Aztecs tend to just open with a couple monasteries now to contest the relics, but it's really a lot more difficult to get those relics now versus the really strong light cap civilizations. So they're still really strong because of their very fast production, very strong economy, and of course if you do land the relics, you're in a good position because the relics count even more for Aztecs. But it's just a little bit more difficult to do this. Still a strong civilization though, carried by their monks in the mid-late game. Next up, we're going to have the Bengalis, and I think Bengalis are another A-tier civilization. I think you could consider them in the S-tier category as well, but I think they're interchangeable between Aztecs. It just depends on which one you enjoy playing the most. I'm going to put them below Aztecs for me personally, but I can really see the argument of Bengalis being higher. I could even see the argument of Bengalis being an S-tier civilization, to be honest, but I think right in A-tier makes sense. Basically, they don't have the best units in the world, but they have a fantastic economy. Getting extra villagers per age on Arena, which is a map where you start with stone walls, means that you're going to have an uncontested eco advantage. They can't pressure you, they can't kill any of your vills, so you're naturally going to be up 2 vills from Dark Age to Feudal Age, another 2 vills from Feudal to Castle, and then another X amount of villagers, depending on how many TCs you have, from Castle Age to Imperial Age. So massive economy boost. You also have the monks with extra armor that comes in really big, and you also have a lot of power units late game. So your units are a little bit awkward, but they are quite strong once they get going. Also, the unique tech from Bengalis, allowing them to have extra pop because it makes their villagers take up less population space, is really strong for late game Arena. Next up, we've got the Berbers. It's really difficult to place Berbers, but in general, they're just simply not the best civilization. I'm going to go ahead and place them probably in top of C tier, and the reason for this is because Berbers don't have any quick out the gate unit. They could go for Cavalier, they could go for Camel Archers, they could go for Champions, but all those options take a while to get going, and their only really strong and cheap unit is the Cavalry line. But Halberdiers are incredibly strong in Arena, and Cavalry not so strong because there's not a lot of space to run around, and there's pretty much no raiding happening unless you cut the wood on the side with an onager, or if you break your opponent's walls. So just fundamentally on Arena, Cavalry is not as strong, and it's more about Infantry, Siege, and Monk, being the strongest units, and Berbers are just not that good in that category, or against it for that matter. Next up, we got the Bohemians, and that's going to be our first S-tier civilization. I will speak really briefly about Bohemians. Everyone knows how strong their Hoofknechts plus Monk plus Halberdier combination is in late game, and if your opponent tries to go Champions to counter it, no problem. We've got really strong hand cannoneers, and that's going to take care of all infantry. Another thing to mention for the Bohemians is the fact that they get chemistry in Castle Age, which allows them to get hand cannoneer in Castle Age to get control of the map. It also lets them get bomber cannons instantly once Imperial Age comes in, because all you have to do is research chemistry on the way up, and then once Imperial Age hits, you don't have to wait for chemistry. Right away you're getting your cannons out, and right away you can upgrade Hoofneeds. And just in general, Bohemians' late game composition is the perfect thing for Arena. Like I said, infantry, good siege, and good monks. However, it's not the best civ on Arena. It is S tier, but I don't consider it to be the best. There are other civilizations that are considered to be stronger because they have a better economy and an easier time in the late game. Next up, we got the Britons, and this is another A tier civilization. It's not going to be S tier because it's just simply not as strong these days. I'm going to go ahead and put it behind the Bengalis. The reason why Britons aren't as strong is because of civilizations like Bohemians with just long-range siege that completely melts archers. Until we see a nerf to Hoofneeds, Britons can never be a really strong civilization on Arena because they simply just flat out die to Bohemians. Skirmishers, hand cannoneer, and then followed up by Hoofneeds in the back just completely destroys Britons, and there's simply nothing that Britons can do. Britons do have a good economy, but it takes a while to get going. They need to add a lot of town centers, which are cheaper, and they need to, get a good amount of villagers to be able to afford their late game comp, which is mainly going to be like longbowmen, some sort of like light cavalry, and trebuchets. And like I said, that composition just doesn't do it against something like the Bohemians. Britons also have a little bit of a hard time fighting for relics because your light cav isn't anything special, and the only early game bonus you have is the cheap TC and the sheep gathering bonus, which is not bad. It's definitely pretty solid compared to some other civilizations, but it just pales in comparison to the top civilizations. Next up, we got the Bulgarians, and while the Bulgarians might seem like a good civilization to like turbo boom with their cheaper town centers, so you can get extra ones, it just doesn't work out in practice because you can't sustain 5 TC production really early. So Bulgarians sound better than they actually are. I don't think they're the worst civilization ever, but I'll probably put them in C tier somewhere. Maybe in B tier actually, because they do get siege onagers, so they're not terrible in terms of siege. They actually have really good siege, and they have pretty strong cavalry and pretty good infantry as well. So they have a few of the options that you probably will want, but you are lacking a little bit in the range unit departments. And like I said, your economy sounds better than it actually is. That being said, you do have the Krepos, which can be a really good tool. So for me, Bulgarians are probably just a mid-tier civ. Next up, we got the Burgundians, and this is going to be an S tier civ that's going to be ahead of Bohemians. If you guys haven't caught on yet or haven't watched my other tier list, the ones closer to the left is the stronger one in the line. So Aztecs better than Bengali, better than Britain, and then up a tier is obviously stronger. So just pointing that out there. And I consider Burgundians to be stronger than Bohemians. I've seen this matchup played almost a dozen times in the past month, and every single time, Burgundians without fail has gotten to a stronger boom than Bohemians and killed Bohemians before Bohemians even researches Hoofneeds. So Bohemians have a stronger composition than Burgundians, that goes without saying, but they just simply never get there because Burgundians are a much faster civilization. And that is a big deal in Arena because if you get the map control really fast, you get to take the extra golds and stones out there, and you get to just completely start to attack your opponent, burst his walls, and deny him the space. And without space, it's hard to function. And for that reason, I think that Burgundians are much stronger than Bohemians. I'm gonna lower my cam here a little bit, by the way. I noticed I'm a little bit too much of just my head and not anything of my body. Just like a floating head. That should be a little bit better. Sorry about that. All right, next up we got the Burmese. You guys know me, I love Burmese in general, but on Arena, they're actually pretty good. I don't think that they're like top tier or anything, but I think they're like upper mid tier for sure. I'm debating between absolute top of B tier or bottom of A tier. I honestly think I'm gonna put them bottom of A tier though. Good economy with the free wood upgrades, great monks, and discount on all the techs. Late game is solid with amazing infantry, pretty passable siege, and good cavalry. You're lacking a little bit in the range unit department, but you have Arambai as well, which is a really strong range unit, unique unit. So I think they get by. They have a lot of power, good economy, good monks. What's there not to like about Burmese? They're not strong enough to compete with the top civs, but they're definitely not bad. Next up, we got the Byzantines. Ooh, Byzantines is another civilization. I know I'm crowding the A tier a lot, but I think Byzantines might even just be better than Britons in a lot of cases. The civilization is incredibly strong. You get Imperial Age for cheaper, you have cheap skirms, camels, you have good monks with really strong healing, by the way. You also get cheap halbs, which comes in, and you have power units in late game, like the Cataphract, you have bomber cannons, and you have really strong buildings as well. So Byzantine seems like the civilization that's good at all stages of the game, and I think they're definitely a dangerous civ, but once again, it's just not strong enough to compete with the top civilizations, but it's just a step below. Next up, we got the Celts, and while you might think that the Celts, because it's a siege and infantry civ, is going to do great on Arena, they're actually terrible versus monks. Celt siege gets completely countered by monks in high level. They have a good economy, yes, but their units in late game is pretty questionable. So I think for me, Celts is probably like a C tier civilization. I'd prefer Berbers over Celts, to be honest. I can see a clearer win condition with Berbers than I can with Celts. Berbers also get cheaper light cap, so you have a better chance of getting relics. Celts just, I don't see them really contesting relics too much. All right, next up we got the Chinese, and Chinese is going to be a classic, B tier run-of-the-mill civilization, probably below Bulgarians. Nothing special in late game, no bomber cannons. You have a good economy in the early game, but you kind of fall off come late game. So you're pretty much hard pressed to win the game early with Chinese, and oftentimes that's pretty hard to do on Arena. Next up we got the Cumans, and while the 2TC boom might seem overpowered, I've played around with it a little bit, and I think it's really good at lower levels. So if you're playing Cumans at lower levels, it's really good on Arena. Basically what you do is 2TC boom, then you go up to a Castle Age fast, and then from Castle Age to Imperial Age you have two choices. Either you add 2 more TCs and you go 4TC boom and just turbo it to the late game, or you go Castle forward, fast Imperial Age, few Kipchucks, and win the game with Kipchucks and Trebs. Actually, first Castle at home, First Castle at home, go up to Imperial Age, then go forward with the second Castle, because now you have like 10 Kipchucks to defend your vills. Second Castle forward, Treb production, few Kipchucks, win the game. You get Chemistry Ballistics. You don't need to get Bracer because you don't have it, so you save resources. And yeah, it's a really strong Kipchuck Treb push that should end the game versus the guy who's still in Castle Age, or still getting to Imperial Age. But yeah, on high level it just doesn't work as well because people are just defending it, going imp themselves, and having a better composition. So the problem with Cumans is really their composition really sucks in late game, and that's their biggest weakness. So yeah, I'm gonna probably place them somewhere in B tier. I still think that they're like really good against some civs, but they're a little harder to play. I'll probably put them top of B tier though. I think that they have a little bit of potential, but yeah, just not as strong as some other civilizations. Next up, we got the Dravidians. I can't see Dravidians being any good, to be honest. Very weak units in late game. Your eco bonus is like used to put the pressure, but you're not really able to put too much pressure on Arena. Probably put them somewhere in C tier, probably even behind Celts. Yeah, probably behind Celts. You still die to monks as well. Late game, your Wood Steel composition can be pretty good though. So you know what? Maybe above Celts, because Wood Steel, Urumi, Halberdier with skirms can be pretty decent. Yeah, I think actually their late game comp is better than Berbers as well. Yeah, nothing special, but nothing too crazy bad either. Next, we got the Ethiopians, probably right behind Cumans. Really strong civilization in terms of units, but their economy bonus isn't a consistent bonus. It's like a power spike bonus, and power spike bonuses are better on open map where you can like force the issue, but on closed maps it's really about consistent bonuses. That's why Burgundians, they get a consistent eco bonus is much better, or Bengalis is much better than a power spike bonus like Ethiopians. What's the difference? Ethiopians, Lithuanians, Persians, they all get like free resources. So Persians gets 50-50, Lithuanians gets 150, Ethiopians get 100-100 at the start of every age, right? But like Burgundians or Bengalis, for example, they get 2 extra villagers. The 2 villagers that they get over the course of 10 minutes of undisturbed booming on Arena are going to gather way more than the 150 resources of Lithuanians, or than the 400 resources you're getting in the early game for Ethiopians. So yeah, the whole idea is that consistent eco bonuses gather resources or gather more resources over time. Power spike eco bonuses give you a good amount of resources, one shot, but don't scale. Hope I explained that pretty well. And yeah, like I said, power spike bonuses are better in open maps where you can make use of that and in short timing. And scaling eco bonuses work better when you have time to boom up and to let the eco bonus gather a lot of resources for you. Next up, we got the Franks, and Franks can never just be a bad civilization. They're always going to be somewhat decent. I actually think Franks are probably better than Bulgarians because they do something similar to Bulgarians, but they get stronger light cap out the gate, which is really good for the Relic fight, and they get an easier eco bonus to use. Bulgarians have to really invest into that 5TC boom. Franks just goes for a 3TC boom with heavy plow really fast, and you can easily get a hand card or something to boost your economy. You don't need a massive economy. 3TC should do it. Maybe a 4th one, for example. but you don't need to massive 5TC, 5TC boom to get an advantage. So I prefer Franks. You also get cheaper castles, which acts like a Krepos. So these two civs are similar, but I think Franks are a bit more proficient. Your late game Paladin could be a threat as well versus a lot of civs, especially the ones that don't get halbs, for example. Next, we got the Goths, and this is a really strong civ, once again, for lower levels and not for higher level. For lower levels, Goths can be really good on Arena. You get the free boom and then go for like infantry spam, which is hard to deal with. You can also like Onager cut on the side to like open the map up and raid them with Husk Scrolls, for example. But in higher level, they just somewhat die to like just like anti-infantry comps, like Siege Onagers, Hand Cannoneer, Monks. And like, what do Goths do? They have only Bomber Cannon to snipe Siege or Monk, and other than that, they don't have a lot of options. Like, they're just running into Hand Cannoneer, especially like Hand Cannoneer with a meat shield. It's just a disaster for Goths. So Goths just heavily die to anti-infantry compositions, and they don't really have a strong eco bonus either. So I'd probably put them maybe even below Celts, honestly. They might even be a D tier civ, which is so sad to say. I'll put them in C tier. Just, they could have one or two good matchups maybe. Next up, we got the Gujaras. That's going to be another probably A tier civilization, actually. Probably above Britons, realistically. I'm not a fan of Gujaras myself, but people love them. They have good matchups versus a lot of civilizations because they have strong camels, and you also have a pretty good time fighting for the relics because you start with that camel scout, which is pretty strong against their scout cavalry. So if you mix that camel with scouts of your own, you have the scouts to snipe his monks and the camel to defend your monks, which is pretty solid. Next up, we got the Hindustani. Hindustani probably another A tier civilization. Not as good as Gujaras, I think, though, in a lot of cases. I might even put Hindustani in the B tier, right behind Cumans. Really good late game composition. Pretty good eco bonus as well. No, Hindustani have to be stronger, guys. I can't. Their eco bonus is just too good with the cheaper builds. Put them above Burmese. Sorry, Burmese. I love you, but Hindustani is too good. Next up, we got the Huns, and I think that actually just might be my first D tier civ, but I just can't bring myself to do it. I'll put Huns behind Goths. I'd still prefer Huns over Goths, but that's a personal thing. I do think Huns are objectively terrible. Why are they so bad? Basically, they only excel in cavalry units, and cavalry isn't great on Arena. They also have very poor monks. They have no bomber cannon. They have pretty weak skirmishers, so you're getting very little value with Huns, and I wouldn't recommend using the civilization at all for Arena. They're still somewhat decent into certain matchups, but in a lot of matchups, they'll get completely destroyed. Next up, we got the Incas, and for me, Incas is a perfect example of a B tier civ. I'm going to split up Franks and Bulgarians and put Incas right in the middle. I think Incas are a civilization that can win pretty much every single game if played 100% correctly. That's not that true in Arena because some of the top civs on Arena would just destroy Incas 100%. But Incas have a lot of good options. They have the Slingers to counter any infantry. They have Eagle Warrior to counter archers. They have the Kamyuk for cavalry. They have Halberdier for cavalry. They have pretty good monks. So they have a good amount of everything. They also have decent skirms. They have a good amount of everything. Not the craziest eco bonus though. So they're not going to be the strongest civ ever, but they're going to be pretty decent all the time. And I think for me, B tier for them makes sense. Next, we got the Italians, and Italians are a civilization that also probably falls in the B tier. Probably ahead of Franks. You have the discounts on the ages, which is quite nice to fight for the relics early on. Your late game comp is extremely strong with Arbalest, Hussar, Bombard Cannon. You can go Genoese Bombard Cannon. You have pretty good monks. You can go Condottiero if it's a fast imp. A lot of options for Italians. Next up, we got the Japanese. Japanese, they're not bad, but I think lacking Bomber Cannon is a pretty big thing. But you have really good monks, and you have really cheap army. Like Halberdier, very strong. Skirmisher gets the job done. You have Arbalest, gets the job done. You have the Yasama Towers, which is really good for slow pushing. Your Trebs are really good. For me, Japanese, if played correctly, can be better than Italians. If played incorrectly, can be like bottom of the barrel. I'll probably put them behind Franks though, just because it's a civilization that has some weaknesses as well. You know what? I'll put them ahead of Franks because of the monks. It has some weaknesses, but if played correctly, it can be extremely strong and extremely oppressive as well. Next, we got the Khmer, and for me, Khmer is probably going to be a top of B tier civ. Above Cumans, you could put them in A tier. Khmer economy is just absolutely nuts. Actually, no, I'm going to put them in A tier. I'll tell you why. Basically, your Ballista Elephants is a really strong powerhouse in the late game. You have Scorpions, like Heavy Scorp, Siege Ram, really strong siege. hussars that are very spammable, which normally isn't the best thing, but when hussars are a meat shield for a powerhouse unit like Scorpion or Ballista Elephant, it becomes really good. You also have battle elephants that are quite powerful as well if your opponent is not making any halberdier. And Khmer have an amazing economy, and their best bonus on Arena is the fact that they don't need a market or a blacksmith or any building for that matter to click up to the next age. So what people do is they stay in Dark Age 1 or 2 pop longer, so like a 25 or 26 pop. Some people are even doing 24 pop because they're crazy. And then once Feudal Age hits, they right away click the castle. Normally you have to make like your market blacksmith, make 2 villagers. In the meantime, Khmer don't need that. They just go straight castle, and it's a massive advantage. You're saving wood, and you're getting to castle faster than your opponent. It's their biggest bonus on Arena, and it makes them a strong civ by default. Next up, you got the Koreans. I think Koreans are a civilization that sound better than they are. Guard towers everywhere, siege, making it messy. Sounds amazing, but it doesn't really work that well in practice. I think Koreans is only a good civilization if your opponent is playing poorly or if your opponent is panicking to like towers and such. So I'm going to probably put them to, not A tier, because that's like your opponent has to misplay for them to be A tier. But I'd probably put them around the Japanese right here. Still a decent civilization, has a bit of trouble fighting for relics, granted, but once they get past that relic, fight portion of it, they have free guard tower, really strong towers, really good siege, good units in like the war wagon, like the cheap halberdier skirm, Arblast, like they have pretty good savings in terms of wood, and yeah, they have a good amount of options in general. I think their monks are like not the best, but not the worst either. I'm not 100% sure about the monk tech tree for Koreans, but pretty good units overall. Next up, I'm just glancing the time to make sure it's not going too long. Next up, I got the Lithuanians. I absolutely detest Lithuanians on Arena. It sounds like it's a good civ. It's like, oh, you grab the relics, you get extra attack on your cavalry. It sounds great. What actually happens is that you might get the relics and then you just lose to anti-halb compositions. Like halberdier, treb, right away, monk. Like instantly, you're not making cav versus that. It's impossible. So then you're forced to play skirmishers and other units like with Lithuanians, but you don't have any consistent eco bonus with the civ. So like you're fighting against an anti-cavalry comp, removing your best units, and you're forced to have, okay, they have good skirms. You're forced to play them through like your secondary good unit, but you don't have the time usually to get to that composition. And so it just feels like it's a civ that gets outpaced more often than not. So for me, Lithuanians probably go somewhere in the C tier. I absolutely despise the civ. Put them right behind Berbers, honestly. Okay, above Berbers, but I absolutely despise the civilization on Arena. I think, like I said, it's a civilization that if everything goes right, okay, fine. You get the relics, you go cav, perfect, life's good. But if your opponent is countering you at all, it's going to be incredibly difficult to make Lithuanians work. I'll put them above Dravidians, whatever. Then, if you get the relics, they're quite strong, especially with Lightus. But like I said, it's a dream scenario that almost never happens. Next, we got the Magyars. Similar to the Huns, Magyars just feel really weak on Arena. They have a better late game than Huns, so I'll put them slightly higher. But I think Magyars, okay, you've had your fun, Goth. Come to the D tier. Join the D tier. I'm so sorry. I know Goth is like a fan favorite, but join the D tier, Goths. You're D tier. It's just the way it is. I'm sorry. And Magyars as well. Magyars just you don't have an eco bonus. The free forging, free attack upgrades doesn't matter because like you can barely attack your opponent. So the best thing Magyars have is going light cav with like cheap scouts and extra attack to fight for the relics. And they have a good late game, but everything in between is pretty horrible. So for me, Magyars are incredibly difficult civilization to make work. But like I said, better than the Huns, probably even better than the Goths because your late game is better. So I think this makes somewhat sense to me. Next, we got the Malay, and while you might think Malay suck in Arena because their units are, generally speaking, quite average or quite weak, they're actually insanely good. For the same reason, Bengalis are good. I'm going to put them probably ahead of Byzantine. The reason why Malay are good on Arena is because they get that consistent eco bonus. They're up to the next age really fast, which gives them extra villagers. You're saving 2 villagers in the feudal age. From dark to feudal, you save 2 vills. From feudal to castle, you save 4 vills. From castle to imp, I think it's like 7 vills. Don't quote me on that though. But the idea is that Malay are getting extra vills because of their faster uptime. So your town center starts working on villagers quickly or more quickly than another civilization. So yeah, it's a civilization that does get off to extra vills, which is like the Bengali bonus. You also have good monks. You have bomber cannons. So you have some important options. Karambits can come in sometimes. So decent units. You also have the Elephant Switch that could be strong. So decent units, good economy. That's an A tier civ for me. Why not higher? They're just not as strong as the top civs. Malayans are going to be hard to place, actually. Nothing special, honestly. Malayans are so mediocre. They're going to be above Lithuanians, but C tier. Literally nothing special. You have good economy with your wood buildings. You might get a nice boom, but your units are all mediocre. You have, good cavalry, but cavalry is nothing special in arena. You have champions that can tank archers or like arrows, but those champions are so power crept, by the way. Like champions with extra pierce armor is so not threatening. Like I'm making like SO. I'm still making Mangadai against you because Mangadai have a lot of attack. I'm still making Arbalest with the meat shield because Arbalest do 2 damage to the champions. So that's fine. I don't know. Champ Scarls are just, you don't even have Halberdier with Malayans, so you're losing to like Arbalest Hussar, honestly. If you're on infantry, and if you're on like camels, then you're just losing to Arbalest, period. If you're on Cavalier, you're losing to Arbalest Halb. You're losing to everything with Malayans. And you have good siege, you have a little bit of everything, but like siege onager without siege engineers. Nothing special. So yeah, you just have nothing special. You have everything decent with Malayans, and I don't like a civ that's decent. I'm trying to win the game, not tie it. Next up, we got the Mayans. This might be the only map I actually don't like the Mayans on. I still think they're decent though. I'll probably put them behind Japanese but above Koreans. I still think they're decent because you have like Plumed Archer, Halb, cheap Arbalest, good economy. So you have really good, like decent options in general. But Mayans have one big weakness on arena. They die to siege onagers. You might think Eagles are good enough to snipe the siege onagers, but if they have siege onager plus champion, Eagles have no chance. In general, siege onager will just attack around the Eagles anyways. So Mayans die to heavy siege late games, and they also have a hard time fighting for the relics. So the way it usually goes with Mayans is that your opponent probably gets the relics because he's gone like light cav or something to get the relics. You're like booming up. You might contest the relics with some plumed archers, some eagles, some monks, but you won't get all 5. You might get max 2-3 with Mayans, and your opponent gets some relics. He'll stall the game, go up to Imperial Age, and just sit at home till he has siege onager, and there's not much you can really do as Mayans. Your best hope is to win in early imp with eagles and plumes and stuff like that. It's easier said than done though. Next up, we got the Mongols. Mongols suffer the same things that Magyars suffer. You have a good late game, but your early game is very weak. You have the hunt bonus early, but that's a power spike bonus. It gets you to feudal age faster, and then what? There's not much you can do. You might get a slightly faster castle time, which leads to like 1 or 2 extra vills, but compare that to Burgundians, which are getting freaking bow saw for free right away, or like cheap bow saw, cheap double bit axe, cheap heavy plow, cheap handcart, cheap wheelbarrow. Like everything, they're getting everything, and you're getting a hunt bonus. You know what I mean? So it's probably better than Magyars, probably even better than Celts because Mangadai are something special. Probably even better than Berbers because their late game is better. Probably even better than Dravidians. Probably even better than Lithuanians. Maybe even better than Malayans, but Chinese, I'm gonna put that at the C tier. But I'd probably prefer Bulgarians over Mongols in most matchups, to be honest. Yeah, I brought Chinese here just because I think Mongols is better than Chinese, but I think Mongols is not a B tier civ, to be fair. Next up, we got the Persians, and Persians on arena actually doesn't sound that bad. You have a pretty good boom. You have an easy time fighting for the relics. Probably put them above Bulgarians as well. Yeah, your late game is also pretty good. I think Persians might be difficult to play, but not a bad civ at all. You could be weak to monks, though. Your only option against monks is like Hussar. You don't have heresy, so yeah, it could be tricky. But Persians have a good late game. Trash bow, Hussar, Halberdier, everything is there pretty much. You also get bomber cannon, which is quite nice. Next up, we got Poles, and ladies and gents, the absolute best civ on arena, the Poles. For me, it's not even close. I think the civilization, if played correctly, beats every other civilization. Leary thinks that Britons counters Poles, but I honestly think that Poles versus Britons, if Poles just literally go for a castle age push, I think Britons will die to that. I think Poles undisturbed, but you know what, maybe Britons might be their hardest matchup, for example. But I think Poles, if played absolutely correctly, it's not even close versus any other civ. Their full work farms are way too OP. They have an amazing late game with Winged Hussar, trample damage, by the way. And I know I said cavalry isn't great, but Poles aren't a cavalry civ. They have Arbalest with Thumb Ring, they have Bomber Cannon with Siege Engineer, they have Monks with Redemption, Sanctity, and Block Printing. The civilization is literally perfect for tech tree, for eco bonus, and for early game pressure. Your early game isn't weak because you have the full work farms kicking in right away. Your mid game isn't weak because you have still a bunch of full work farms. You're starting to mine some stone, which gives you gold. And your late game isn't weak because you have amazing units. and amazing options. Did I mention the Obuch, which is also really strong versus any kind of infantry composition? Obuch is great against camels, you name it. Poles are absolutely broken. Best arena civilization by far. Not by far. Best arena civilization. And that's just my opinion. Other people might prefer Bohemians, Burgundians, like I said. But for me, Poles is S tier. Right behind the Poles, and I know it's going to sound weird, but arguably better than Poles, but it's because of a cheesy mechanic. It's not like it's a better civ overall. It's a cheesy mechanic that makes Portuguese arguably better than Poles. I'm not going to bite, though. I'm going to even put them behind Burgundians overall. But it's something. Portuguese is really controversial right now. I'll put them right here for now just to catch some eyes. Basically, Portuguese have this overpowered strategy right now because of the new bonus that makes the Portuguese get wood from gathering berries. Your standard berry patch is 6, and you get 250 free wood once you finish that. People are going mill first before lumber camp, using the wood from the berries to get their early game started. They get the lumber camp later, and what that does is that it gives them basically a free 250 res in the early game. You might think that doesn't sound great, like Lithuanians get an extra 150 res. Why aren't Lithuanians great? Well, the reason Portuguese are great is because they're able to go for a forward castle organ gun play, and organ guns are incredibly oppressive. So early game power spike with a civilization that can really use it and put the pressure and get that timing advantage makes the civilization really strong. The organ gun rush is incredibly powerful, and it doesn't stop there. People are realizing how overpowered Vitorias are. If you can get to Imperial Age faster than your opponent, it doesn't even matter if he's literally 50 vils up. If you just slap down 50, like 4 or 5 Vitorias, you're gonna get an amazing economy. Every Vitoria is around like 10 vils worth of 10 vils with good eco upgrades worth of production or worth of resource gather rate, and they gather for all the resources together. So you don't need to make a town center, make vils, make farms. You don't need to get eco upgrades. You just get a Vitoria, which costs 250 stone, 250 gold. It's so cheap. And yes, it takes up 20 pop, but that doesn't matter on arena because you're going fast imp. You have like only 50 pop. You have 150 left space for Vitorias. You can make 5 Vitorias and not even blink. You can make 6 or 7 if you're really feeling spicy. And then your late game comp is so good. You have discount on every gold unit. You have amazing monks, amazing siege, amazing organ guns, amazing cav in the form of cavalier. They're cheap. Pretty, fully upgraded cavalier for cheap is pretty good. And so like you have all the options. You even have halberdier if you want them. You have all the options that you can ever ask for with Portuguese. You have Arbalest as well. The list goes on. So what people are doing is that they're putting pressure with organ guns, and if that fails, they fall back on fast and Vitorias. Even if it works, then they continue pushing organ guns and win the game. So in my opinion, Portuguese are not like the best civilization arena. They're not the most well-rounded, but they're the cheesiest right now, and they're the hardest to stop if you're not well prepared for them. Going into Nili's Apartment Cups at NEC4, the next major S tier tournament, I think Portuguese will be either pick ban or heavily prepared for an arena. Keep an eye out for that. It's not the best of an arena, but it's the most cheesy right now, and it has the potential to be the best civ if your opponent isn't watching out for it. All right, enough on Portuguese. Let's move on to the Saracens now. Saracens are a civilization similar to the Mongols that have an amazing late game, but nothing special in the early game. You do have the market that could help out, and your late game is great, but it's not gonna get you there more often than not. And for me, Saracens are probably somewhere like the Chinese or like the Mongols around here. Probably put them above the Chinese because your late game is really good, but you don't have Magdai, so Mongols will be a little bit higher up. Next, you got the Sicilians. I think Sicilians are pretty solid. Not sure where I'd put them though, but you have a good boom. Your units aren't special, but you have a good amount of different options in the late game. I mean, I honestly, I put them, personal thing, I put them behind Saracens. I don't think they're my favorite civ, and I don't think they're that scary to play against, but you could go for like 3-4 town centers really fast because your town centers build quickly, and that's nice. And you also get the extra 100 stone. Similar to Bulgarians in that department, I suppose, but Bulgarians have better units and better options than Sicilians, to be fair. Next up, we got the Slavs. Way too slow of a civilization for me, and your units are pretty predictable. But that being said, you have strong infantry and strong siege, and you have decent monks as well. So it's not my favorite civilization, but I recognize that it has good options for arena. And for that reason, I'd probably put it, I don't know, maybe top of C tier, maybe bottom of B tier. Yeah, probably bottom of B tier. I think it's a civilization. I'll put it above Bulgarians and maybe even above Persians. Yeah, that makes sense. It's a civilization that, you know, it depends on who's using it, I think, and who can make the best use of it. But yeah, it's not an easy civ to play, but it's not a too scary civ either. It's right in the middle there, I think. You want to get a good economy with Slavs and then spam cavalry, infantry, and siege, pretty much. Next up, we got the Spanish, and Spanish are pretty good in Arena, man. Your conquistadors alone make them a scary civilization to play against. They also have pretty reasonable late game tech, very nice flexibility. They have really good monks. Eco bonuses, they have a little bit with the faster building, so you can get like town centers up faster, that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit of an eco boost. But I think overall, they are a civilization that probably falls in the B tier somewhere. I'll probably put them ahead of Slavs, but behind Incas. Yeah, I think that makes sense for the Spanish. Conquistador all-ins are not nearly as strong as the Organ all-in, by the way. And the only reason for that is because Spanish don't get that eco bonus that Portuguese get, and conquistadors cost food, which is a harder resource to get when you have lower economy than wood. It's easy to throw 10 vills on wood, but if you want to get farms, you need to put 3 vills on wood, 7 vills on food. After making the farms, it takes a long while to get that food in. So for that reason, Organ is better or easier to get to than the Conquistador. Next up, we got the Tatars. Nothing special from the Tatars. It's like the Magyars, it's like the Huns. It's a cavalry civilization with no bombard cannon, and it's just hard to make use of their power spikes. To get free thumbering, cool. Can't use that because the opponent's stonewalled. So that, you know, free thumbering only works in late game, and it's not that great of a bonus. I'll probably put them ahead of Magyars because I think 18 range trebuchets can be dangerous, but that's the only thing they have in my opinion. Nothing that special from them. Next up, we got the Teutons, and Teutons are going to fall probably in the A tier somewhere. I'll put them ahead of Gajars, but behind Byzantine. Teutons, at a certain point in time, were a top tier arena civ, but every single top tier arena civ right now works really well against Teutons. You could put Teutons ahead of Aztecs though, ahead of Malay. For me personally though, I think that they just completely struggle to like hand cannoneers, monks, halberdier comps. Like all of these civs do what Teutons do, but better, pretty much. Next up, we got the Turks, and Turks are gonna fall probably right here, right behind Burgundians. I think they beat Bohemians, but Bohemians could beat Turks as well. It's a pretty skill matchup, but I think Turks have a better matchup against other civilizations. So like, I'd rather have Turks up against most of these civilizations over Bohemians. And I think Turks have more options than Bohemians. You have the heavy CA that could come in really clutch. You have the 14 range cannons, which are arguably just as good as Hoofneeds, maybe a little bit worse, a little bit better in other areas. You have really good bombard towers. Free Hussar comes in so clutch. Free Light Cav lets you fight for the relics really well. You have fast tip threats. You have the Janissary. Turks have a ton of different options, and in my opinion, they're just shy of Burgundians because Burgundians' eco bonus is simply too strong, and they're just shy of Portuguese because of the Portuguese cheese and the Fortorias being a little bit too strong right now. Next up, we got the Vietnamese. Nothing too special from the Vietnamese, but nothing that bad either. Probably put them somewhere in the B tier. You have a decent economy, nothing crazy, decent units, nothing crazy. Probably put them right there ahead of Bulgarians. And finally, last but not least, I don't want to make this too long, we got the Vikings. I'll probably put Vikings as a really bad civ. I think they might be the worst civ right now. Yeah, I think they might be the worst civ on Arena. Reason being, you die to SO every single time. You have no monks with like redemption, you have no bomber cannon, and you have no power unit. You don't even have good cavalry to snipe like siege. You just hard die to siege. You're an infantry civilization like Goth, but you don't have access to like bomber cannons, and that's a really big red flag. The only thing Vikings have is a good economy, but I don't think good economy is enough to win any game versus civilizations that also have a good economy and have much better units and power spikes. Alright, that's going to do it for my arena tier list. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Let me know if you guys disagree in the comments or if you guys agree. And if I missed anything or left anything out or was wrong about something, let me know. I'd love to hear your discussion on the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.